Hello, dear friends, and welcome to our weekly program. We're live broadcasting from the Divine Light Spiritist Group and Iseha Spiritual Healing Center in Northern California. And we're continuing our study about the Spirit's teachings of the Gospel according to Spiritism by Allan Kardec. What we're doing is we're focusing on what the spirits on high are providing to us in terms of explanation that is added to the chapters that Allan Kardec present to us in the Gospel. And today we will be studying chapter 10. Chapter 10 is entitled Blessed Are the Merciful. And what Allan Kardec touches on is obviously forgiveness. Because in order for us to be merciful, it means to be forgiving. So the first part is he talks about meekness that's associated with mercy. He says reconciliation is important with our adversaries. Then the next title is the sacrifice most pleasing to God, which we already know is forgiveness. And then he talks about the speck and the plank in one's eye, and we are familiar with that as well. And then his last chapter is do not judge, so that you yourself might not be judged. Let him who is without sin cast the first stone. And we know all of this is based on Jesus' teachings, of course. So then today we will move on to the Spirit's teachings. And the first one is entitled Forgiveness of Offenses. Since forgiveness is at the key of our work in our incarnations, it is very challenging for most of us, and yet the reward is ever so much greater. And so the spirits are literally focusing in on forgiveness for us. As we're studying this chapter. So what happened is somehow the program got interrupted, but I see you guys are still here. So what we're going to do is we're going to share the screen as we begin with our first entry. So just bear with me for a moment here. And here we are. Should show up, and now we're going to do the play from start. So here's Spirit's Teachings, chapter 10, and it is items 14 to 21. So let us move forward. So this first one is forgiveness of offenses, and it's by Simeon. So what does he say about forgiveness? How many times should I forgive my brother or sister? And we know the answer because Jesus gave us the answer. Not 7 times, but 70 times 7. This is how important forgiveness is. This is one of Jesus's teachings that should strike your mind, he says, and speak to your heart the loudest. So it's supposed to strike our mind the hardest and speak to our heart the loudest. So that teaches us already, or puts the emphasis on forgiveness for us. Compare these words of mercy with a prayer so simple, so concise, and so great in its aspirations, which Jesus gave to his disciples, and you will discover the same thought. And he's talking about the Lord's Prayer. Jesus' righteousness par excellence responds to Peter, because Peter was asking him, you shall forgive without limit. You shall forgive every offense as many times as it is committed against you. We're going to read this again, because these are not just hollow words that our mind's going to say, oh yeah, I've heard this before. Okay, what else is new? What else is Simeon saying that might be news for me? But it is important, as Simeon just said a second ago, that this strikes us in our hearts the loudest. So he says, You shall forgive without limit. That means 24/7 and all the time. There is never a but. There is never a holding back. The recommendation is to forgive without limit. You shall forgive every offense as many times as it is committed against you. So again, every offense, not just this offense, but oh no, that one I can't and won't. It's too cruel. No, we're asked to forgive all offenses, all with capital letters. Then he says, you shall do for others what you would want your heavenly Father to do for you. And this is the brilliance of it. We know that by giving we receive. We know the golden rule. And the golden rule is about giving, treating others the way we would like to be treated, right? So here we hear it again. Even with forgiveness, we are asked to forgive in order to be forgiven and to forgive as much as God forgives us. Because by golly, we know that we need lots of forgiveness. And not only in this lifetime, but for gazillion lifetimes, God has forgiven us and always giving us a new opportunity. Has God not forgiven you often? Does he count the number of times his forgiveness has descended to wipe away your wrongs? We know the answer. No, God does not count. Do we still count? So listen to Jesus' answer and like Peter, apply it to yourselves. Forgive, be indulgent, charitable, generous, even lavish with your love. Isn't that beautiful? We're invited to be lavish with our love. How does that look like to be lavish with our love? Maybe we can ask our loved ones, our friends, our co-workers, how can I love you more? How can I serve you more? So we can inch towards lavishness. So we're invited to be lavish with our love. Give because the Lord will repay you. Forgive because the Lord will forgive you. Abase yourselves because the Lord will lift you up. Humble yourselves because the Lord will sit you at his right hand. What beautiful promises, dear friends. And we know they're not empty promises because Jesus and the good spirits and God, they don't give us empty promises. It's all deeply genuine and the truth with capital T. So what did he say? Give because the Lord will repay you. Forgive because the Lord will forgive you. Abase yourselves because the Lord will lift you up. Humble yourselves because the Lord will sit you at his right hand. Beautiful, dear friends. The invitation is there. The doors are wide open. All we need to do is step through them through practicing the good. If you say you are spiritists, then be so. Yes, let us walk the talk, right, friends? Forget the evil that has been done to you and think of one thing only. We're supposed to think of one thing only. Let's see what that is. The good you can do. There it is, dear friends. Emmanuel says, seek goodness, feel goodness, visualize goodness with all the resources you have at hand. And why are we supposed to do that, according to Emmanuel? To undo the shackles that we have formed against our own hearts. So here we are reminded one more time. We are supposed to only think of one thing, and that is, how can we do the good? Those who enter upon this path must not wander from it even in thought. We know that thought is life. So doing the good starts with our thoughts because they are responsible for their thoughts, known by God. Therefore, empty your thoughts of any sentiments of rancor. God knows what lies at the bottom of each one's heart. So happy are they who can go to sleep every night saying, I have nothing against my neighbor. There it is, dear friends. There it is, very clear. Forgive without limits. Forgive every offense as many times as it was committed against us. Let us be indulgent, charitable, generous, lavish with our love, and only think about the good we can do. Lovely. Thank you, Simeon, for this recipe for success. Now we're moving on to item 15, and item 15 is entitled, again, Forgiveness of Offenses, just because the forgiveness is so important. Not only Allan Kardec and Jesus, of course, spend so much time and energy on it, but also the spirits in the gospel according to Spiritism. So what does the Apostle Paul say about forgiveness? Forgiving one's enemies is to ask forgiveness for oneself. And let us really remember that. It's really just by giving we receive. Forgiving one's friends is to give them proof of friendship. Forgiving offenses is to show that one has become better. Therefore, my friends, forgive, so that God may forgive you. For if you are hard, demanding, and inflexible, if you are severe towards even a minor offense, how can you expect God to forget that every day you are in ever greater need of indulgence? How can we, right, friends? Woe to those who say, I shall never forgive, because they speak their own condemnation. Moreover, who knows if looking deep down inside you might not discover that you yourself were the aggressor. And then that ties into for us as a duty to get to know ourselves better. Know thyself. And we do that through the nightly review, for example, through the inner observer who we will boost every moment of every day, so that we can see whether maybe we are the ones who start the whole domino effect. And if you assume that you have absolutely nothing to be blamed for, in that case, you will have even greater merit if you show clemency. So if we find out that we are actually the aggressors in some little ways, then let us be observant of that and let us change it and make up for that mistake. But if we find out, he says, that you have absolutely nothing to be blamed for, in that case, you will have even greater merit if you show clemency. Let us not forget the merit aspect, and we need merit because there's still a lot that we need to change towards the good, and a lot of offenses that need to be forgiven, and we need to undo. So we need all the merit we can get. And we do that by forgiving and doing the good. As Simeon said, just focus on one thing, and that is doing the good. There are two quite different manners of forgiving. And this is important too. There's two ways of forgiving. There's the forgiveness from the lips. And then there's the forgiveness from the heart. We know when we were children, our parents asked us, or even we as parents maybe asked our children, forgive XYZ, or pardon yourself. And how often have we just done it? Or we've observed our children to do it, to serve lip service, just to forgive from the lips. But now we're being reminded that's not enough, because it's the heart. It's the heart that needs to be engaged in everything. The heart and the mind. So then there's the forgiveness from the heart. And many say to their adversaries, I forgive you, while inwardly they feel a secret pleasure when ills befall them, and they tell themselves that they got only what they deserved. Have we been there, friends? We don't want to be there anymore, do we? How many say, I forgive, and then add, but I'll never reconcile. I never want to see that person again for the rest of my life. Is that forgiveness according to the gospel? Is that forgiveness according to the gospel? No. True forgiveness, Christian forgiveness, is the kind that casts a veil over the past. So true forgiveness is casting a veil over ourselves, or over the offense. It is the only kind that will be credited to you, for God is not satisfied with appearances. Do not forget that true forgiveness is recognized by what? What is true forgiveness? The forgiveness that comes from the heart, that casts a veil over the past. True forgiveness, the sign is expressed, shown by our actions. Our actions speak louder than our words. Somebody famous once said, your actions are so loud that I can't hear your words. Yes, dear friends. So do not forget that true forgiveness is recognized by actions much more than by words. Jesus taught us, judge the tree by its fruits, not the tree. It's also walking our talk. It's all about the heart. To be cohesive. That's what is important. So, dear friends, great reminders. Thank you, Paul. Forgiving one's enemies is to ask for forgiveness for ourselves. And then we have the two different forgivenesses, lips and heart. It needs to come from the heart, which shows itself more in our actions. And of course, we're invited to self-evaluate, to find out, have we played a role in the debacle that we may find ourselves in? And if we do, we make up for it. And if we don't, then we just accumulate more merit. Item 16, indulgence. So we're in the chapter of mercy. So forgiveness and indulgence are linked to mercy. So this comes from is by Joseph, a protective spirit. And he says, indulgence does not see the defects of others. Or if it does, it avoids talking about them or publicizing them. Well, later on, we will have St. Louis quantify this a little bit, saying that, yes, we do see injustice, or we see defects of others, and we need to. But what he really, and he explains why, St. Louis will explain to us why, but what he's really referring to, we assume, is that we dwell on it and it becomes the totality of every situation or every person we encounter. So that's why we won't. Indulgence means we're looking for the good. It means we have goodwill, benevolence. So indulgence does not see the defects of others, or if it does, it avoids talking about them or publicizing them, and that's the key. No gossip about them. On the contrary, it hides them so that they do not become known. And if malevolence uncovers them, indulgence always has an excuse to mitigate them. That is a plausible and genuine excuse, and not one of those that has the appearance of mitigating the wrong, but actually emphasizes the wrong with clever perfidy. So what is he saying? He's saying that we won't hone in into the defects of others. We use goodwill. We're helping others with their defects. We are not publicizing them. We're not gossiping about them. We're actually attempting to hide them, make excuses for them. However, later on, St. Louis says, if those defects harm others, we have a different responsibility. But that's not what we're talking about yet. So we're invited to mitigate the defects of others, but really be vigilant with our own. He says, indulgence is never concerned with the wrongs of others unless it can be of assistance. And furthermore, it takes care to mitigate them as much as possible. It does not make shocking remarks, nor does it have reproach on its lips. Oh, people, when will you judge your own hearts, your own thoughts, your own actions, without concerning yourselves with what your brothers and sisters do? It's the speck, right, that we so easily find in everyone else, but the plank that makes us so blind, we don't see in our own eyes. So this is Joseph's version of the plank and the speck that Jesus talked about. He says, when will you judge your own hearts, your own thoughts, your own actions, without concerning yourselves with what your brothers and sisters do? When will you look upon yourselves with your stern eyes? When will we be stern with ourselves and indulgent towards others? That is what we're asked to be. Stern with ourselves and not beating ourselves up, but recognizing where our defects are and working on them. And then being indulgent towards others, because we understand what defects are. We know our own, and we're working on them. We know how hard it is, right, friends? So that's why we can be indulgent. We recognize it in others. Be indulgent, my friends, because indulgence appeals, calms, and uplifts, whereas sternness discourages, keeps away, and angers. And we know that. When we become stern, critical, negative in our thoughts and in our assessments of our brothers and sisters, we become discouraging. We become angry. And we alienate ourselves. But if we become indulgent, then we appeal. We calm others down and we uplift. We're becoming constructive versus destructive. So if we're stern, we become destructive. If we are indulgent, we're constructive. We're doing the good. And that's what Simeon invited us to do, to only focus on one thing. It's actually pretty simple, isn't it? If we only need to focus on one thing. Of course, everyday life has a focus on many other things, but hopefully always with the good in mind. All right, friends. Let us move on to item 17. Now, this item is by Jean, Bishop of Bordeaux. And he talks also about indulgence. So, merciful, mercy, is intimately linked to forgiveness and indulgence. Both are, excuse me, friends, both are attributes of what? Forgiveness and indulgence are both attributes of charity. Spirits in the Spirits book give us the definition. Goodwill towards all, indulgence towards others' imperfections, and forgiveness of all offenses. That is the definition of charity. So being merciful is being charitable. So what does Jean say? Here it is. Be indulgent towards the wrongs of others. Whatever they might be, do not judge with severity except where your own actions are concerned. The Lord will show indulgence towards you, just like with forgiveness, right? To the degree that you have shown indulgence towards others. So it is with all virtues. The more we can give it to others, with forgiveness, with indulgence, with any virtue, the more we're getting it from God. Lovely, isn't it? We decide how far we open the faucet. That's free will. That's where we have power. Understand the infinite mercy of your Father and never forget to say to him through your thoughts and especially through your actions, forgive our offenses as we forgive those who have offended us. And that is turning towards the Lord's Prayer. There it is. And we've prayed the Lord's Prayer so many times. Have we taken it to heart? Are we practicing it truly every day, all the time, starting with our thoughts? That is the question for us today. Understand the infinite mercy. Okay, we said that. Understand well the value of these sublime words of forgive our offenses as we forgive those who have offended us. Understand well the value of these sublime words. Not only is their literal meaning praiseworthy, but also the teaching they contain. What are you asking of the Lord when you ask Him to forgive you? What are we asking Jesus? What are we asking God when we ask Him to forgive us? By asking God to forgive your transgressions, you are asking Him the favor of His grace, that you may not fall into them again, and for the strength needed to enter upon a new pathway, a way of submission and love upon which you can add reparation to repentance. Let us read that again and let us take that apart. So when we're asking God for forgiveness for our offenses, what are we really asking? We're asking God to forgive our offenses, our transgressions. We're doing that. And by doing that, we're doing what? We're asking God for God's grace. We're asking Him the favor of His grace. We're asking God the favor of His grace. And that is what we are doing when we forgive others. We give grace. We're graceful. We're merciful. We're charitable. We're actually doing it. We're doing it. We're practicing love. We're practicing charity. So, dear friends, we're asking God the favor of His mercy. When we want mercy, then we need to give it. And that's the bottom line. How can we expect to get something when we don't practice it? That would be selfish, right? And we know that at the root cause of all evil on planet Earth lies selfishness and pride. So today, we're reminded of the mechanism. By giving, we receive. How can we expect something from God when we don't give it? All right, dear friends, let's continue. Whenever you forgive your brothers and sisters, do not content. Let's just check here for a moment whether technology is working. Just a second. It's good. Whenever you forgive your brothers and sisters, do not content yourselves with casting the veil of forgetfulness over their wrongs. That veil, why? Because that veil is frequently very transparent to your eyes. So if something happens to us and we're upset about it, now we have a hard time forgiving. Now we follow the beautiful teachings and we put a veil of forgetfulness over whatever happened. Now Jean is saying that by casting the veil of forgetfulness over the wrongs, we need to be aware of the fact that this veil is frequently very transparent to our eyes. So we can kind of see what's underneath it. We can look through it. Oh gosh, this is what happened to me. It's not really, the forgiveness hasn't really happened. So he says, bring them love at the same time as forgiveness. So forgetfulness, putting a veil of forgetfulness over actions that were painful to us is not enough. We are invited to also bring love. Love at the same time as forgiveness. Doing the good. So he's saying the same thing. Do for them what you would ask your Heavenly Father to do for you. Replace the anger that defiles with the love that purifies. Replace the anger that defiles with the love that purifies. Preach by example the active, inexhaustible charity that Jesus has taught you. Excuse me, dear friends, I have to get some water. Been painting today, and the air in here is not very good. I'll be right back. Okay, we're back. So he says, preach by example the active, inexhaustible charity that Jesus taught you. Follow his divine model. Walk in his footsteps. They will lead you to the place of refuge where you will find repose after struggle. Our guiding model is taking us to the right place. And Jesus taught us how important forgiveness is. Like him, bear all your crosses and thoughtfully, but courageously mount your Calvary. On its top is glorification. So let us follow Jesus Christ, even in our suffering. Let us mount our cross and thoughtfully and courageously go up to Calvary. On top of it is our glorification. Beautiful, dear friends. The invitation is strong and it's unanimous. All the Spirit's teachings tonight in chapter 10, Blessed are the Merciful, point into the same direction. It's wonderful. It's clear. And it's a wonderful reminder. So let us continue to item 18. So this is by Dufetre. He was a bishop of Nevers. And he says, all of you have evil tendency to overcome, defects to correct, and habits to change. Boom. So the bomb dropped. So we know. So we all have evil tendencies to overcome. We all have defects, and we all have habits that need changing. All of you have a burden that is heavy or less heavy, but which you must get rid of in order to scale the peak of the mountain of progress. Then why are you so all-seeing towards your neighbor, yet so blind regarding yourselves? When will you stop noticing the speck in your brother's or sister's eye, while not noticing the plank that blinds you and causes you to go from downfall to downfall? That is, when will we stop with the old habits of pointing fingers? When do we stop blaming? When do we focus on others' wrongdoings? For millennia, we've been taught not to do it, and we have continuously stayed with that habit. And we know, because we still have such a hard time not doing it, we can judge from our tendencies that we haven't quite gotten that lesson yet. So this is our lifetime. Spiritism and the spirits and Allan Kardec are so clear in bringing Jesus' teachings to us. We don't have any excuses anymore, friends. All men and women proud enough to deem themselves superior in virtue and marriage to their incarnate brothers and sisters are foolish and at fault, and God will punish them on the day of his justice. And we know that the word punish is not so cool anymore these days, because we know God is not punishing. God, we don't have a punishing God. We have a just or merciful, loving, caring God. So it's the consequence. It's the law of cause and effect. It's all up to us. The true character of charity is modesty and humility, which consists in seeing the defects of others only on the surface, and in taking an interest in valuing whatever is good and virtuous in them. And that is the benevolence, seeing the good, the virtuous in everyone. Let's hone in on that and kind of just maybe just about notice the defects, but not indulge in the defects, but be indulgent as a result of all the merits, the good we see in our brothers and sisters. The true character of charity is modesty and humility, which consists in seeing the defects of others only on the surface and in taking and in valuing whatever is good and virtuous in them. For if the human heart is an abyss of corruption, there is always in a few of its hiddenmost corners the seed of a few good sentiments and the life spark of the spiritual essence. Nobody is all bad. Nobody. Let us put our big Sherlock Holmes flashlight on and look for the good in others. Practical charity, charity of the heart, charity towards one's neighbors and towards oneself. In other words, charity towards all and love for God above all things. Because love for God does what? It summarizes all duties. All of our duties are summarized in this one maxim: love God above all else and your neighbors as yourself. And it is impossible to love God truly without practicing charity, which He made into a law for all the creatures. So God is so wise. He created a law to practice charity. And by practicing charity, we're loving God. And when we're loving God, we have to, by definition, if we truly love God, we have to love our brothers and sisters. Why? Because we're children of God. We have the divine spark in us. We are part of God. God is in us and we're in God. We're the children of God. Doing the good, as Simeon say, only focus on doing the good is loving God. And it's loving our brothers and sisters. It's very logical. Now we're going to item 19. I guess we jumped to 20. Well, let's see. Anyway, we are at item 19. Item 19 falls under indulgence, and it's by St. Louis. And St. Louis is being asked a question. And here's the question. Since no one is perfect, does it follow that no one has the right to reprehend one's neighbor? So in other words, none of us are perfect. So do we still, even though we're imperfect, have the right to reprehend our neighbors? The answer, of course not. Does it follow that no one has the right to reprehend one's neighbor? That's the question. Does no one have the right to reprehend the neighbor? Because we're all imperfect. And the answer is no. In other words, yes, we do have the right. Of course not, since each of you must labor for the progress of all. And that's also charitable. We live the law of society. We live in society because we learn from our brothers and sisters and we are helping our brothers and sisters. So we're imperfect and we're allowed to reprehend our brothers and sisters. But it's all how we do it. You must reprehend others with moderation. And here is the guideline. So yes, we're allowed to reprehend, but with moderation. Because remember, we're focusing on the good. With a useful purpose. So reprehension happens with moderation. And reprehension happens only if there's a useful purpose. and not as it usually is done for the pleasure of denigrating them. So it's not like because we feel spiteful and we just want to beat into our slice to their lives and just because we find pleasure of denigrating them. No, that's not the right motivation. That's not the right intention to reprehend our brothers and sisters. But doing it with moderation and for a useful purpose can be okay. In this latter instance, namely the one where we're denigrating others, criticism is wickedness. In the former, when we criticize with moderation and with a good purpose, it is a duty, and this is important. So now we're learning, St. Louis gives us nuances. Overall, we're focusing on the good. We're not criticizing, we're not reprehending because we're wicked and spiteful. We're doing it in moderation and for a good purpose. And then it becomes our duty. And it will be further defined even by St. Louis in the next items. With charity commands to be achieved with all the care possible. So reprimanding, which is our duty, if it's done in moderation and with a useful purpose, is our duty. Which charity commands to be achieved with all the care possible. So we're using all the care possible. Moreover, the criticism one casts at others must at the same time be directed towards ourselves, asking if one does not deserve it more. And this is the third ingredient. So we need to do reprimanding in moderation and with a good purpose, and making sure that we run it by our own conscience, our own actions, to see whether maybe we need it more than others. We know that beautiful famous saying, when you spot it, you've got it. So this is very wise by St. Louis. Indirectly or maybe directly, he's saying the same thing. Let us make sure that it's not in us more alive than in anyone else. So now we're going to item 21. Would it be, it's actually 20. It's a little bit confusing here with our PowerPoint. Something must have gone wrong. But anyway, so we're at item 20, dear friends. Would it be reprehensible to observe others' imperfections when it does not result in a benefit for them, and when one does not divulge them? And here it is. And this is actually this one. Everything depends on our intention. So would it be reprehensible to observe others' imperfection when it does not result in a benefit for them? Remember before, St. Louis said it has to be for a good purpose when we reprimand someone. But is it reprehensible if we don't have a good purpose? And then he says, well, everything depends on your intentions. Are we being spiteful, or are we being wicked, or is our intention on the good while we want to reprimand someone? Of course, no one is forbidden from seeing evil where there is evil. And this is the fine-tuning. If there is evil, dear friends, we're not forbidden from seeing it. But it's the moderation. It's looking for the good as well. Furthermore, it would be unsuitable to see only the good everywhere. Such an illusion would be harmful to progress. The error is in making the observation to the detriment of one's neighbor, unnecessarily discrediting him or her, committing in the public eye. It would also be reprehensible to make such an observation only to take pleasure in the sentiment of malice. The opposite applies. When casting a veil over evil to hide it from the public, we limit ourselves to observing it for our own evolution. That is to study it in order to avoid that we censor in others, so that we're not going to fall into the trap. So if we see evil and we cast a veil over it, then only we will benefit from it. Hopefully we will, and not just look the other way. But it's always good to reflect everything back into our own lives and see, am I not guilty of this? Am I not doing it at least sometimes? Or have I done it in the past? Have I eradicated that from my own habits? A lot of self-reflective questions come up today from this study, because it's so at the core of our work, forgiveness and indulgence. And they go hand in hand, part of charity. Furthermore, is not this observation useful to the moralist who would be moralist? How could the moralist paint the defects of humankind without studying the models? So it can be helpful to see evil, in other words. And it's what we do with it, our intention, that is at the core of it. And in the next item, he answers the question, are there cases in which it is useful to disclose someone's else's evil? That's when sometimes we may think, oh, tattletale, right? Oh, I'm turning somebody in, and is that bad? Is that a bad thing to do? And it will just come back to haunt me, because if I do it to others, it will be done to myself. Good question he's asking. So he says, are there cases in which it is useful to disclose someone else's evil? And here's the answer. And this is really important. So when we see evil, we may cast a veil over it and say, all right, I'm learning from it, because it's maybe not only hurting that person, not anyone else. But when are we disclosing someone's evil? And St. Louis helps us with the answer. And he says, this question is very delicate. And it is here that one must appeal to charity rightly understood. If a person's imperfections, and this is the key, if a person's imperfections are harmful to that person alone, so it's whatever evil thing they're doing is only harming the person who is doing the evil thing, it would never be useful to disclose them. However, if they might cause harm to others, it is preferable to take into account the interests of the majority against the interests of only one. And that's where it becomes delicate. So if we see evil in somebody else and they're only harming themselves, and we have the opportunity to bring awareness to it in our brothers and sisters in a delicate, gentle way, without only seeing the negative, but keep being indulgent and keep looking for the good, it's one thing. We don't want to disclose it. But if the evil is done to more, is expressed to others, and there's a whole group maybe that's being harmed by it, at that moment we must weigh, as he says, the interests of the majority, all those who are impacted by it, against the interests of only the person who is expressing the evil. So every case will be different. Depending on the circumstances, unmasking hypocrisy and falsehood may compromise an obligation, because it is better for one person to fall than for several to become his or her victims. It's better that only one person gets harmed than a whole group. In such a case, one must weigh the sum of the advantages and disadvantages. So there's no quick, jumping the gun kind of answer to this. If we are in a situation like that, we need to weigh very delicately and take our time and see what the right course will be, dear friends. But we do have a duty to be of service, even when it comes to observing evil in our surrounding. Here we are. Hi, Teresa. Hi, Mark. Hi, Natalie. So nice to see you guys. Thank you for joining. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them and we will get back to them. This concludes our study for tonight. If you want to go back and read the whole chapter, because we didn't read everything, but picked out the gist, please do so. It's chapter 10 in the Gospel according to Spiritism, entitled, Blessed are the Merciful. Thank you for joining. Kathy, you're here too. Thank you so much for saying hi. Thank you, dear friends. And in the week to come, let us practice mercy. Mercy, which is expressed, is a form of charity and is expressed through indulgence and forgiveness. And let us, as a key, remember that in order to love God, we can only love God if we're indulgent and forgiving with our brothers and sisters. It's at the core of our work, of our incarnation, our reincarnatory path. All right, friends. So God willing, we will meet again next week, same place, with chapter 11, Loving One's Neighbor as Oneself. The continuation of mercy. Many blessings. God bless you. Mwah.